Good morning, Stallions. I wanted to give you a tutorial for the ACT writing prompt so that you can see what it's going to look like. This tutorial is going to specifically focus on looking at the prompt and figuring out what it is asking you to do. Now, one little caveat or a little thing for you to know, not all of the prompts will look the same. For example, this one has a little paragraph here that's giving you information about the prompt. It's then giving you three perspectives and then the essay task. Not all the prompts will look like that, but we're just going to dive into this one, and I wanted you to expose you to it so in case you do see something like this, you'll know what it's asking. So notice at the top of the page, we've got our paragraph here. They have also titled the paragraph, Public Health and Individual Freedom. Well, as you guys know, anytime somebody titles something, that's giving you a clue. So we can have a pretty good idea that this prompt is going to be about public health, okay, and what that has to do with my freedom as an individual, as a person, a citizen of the U.S. So the first thing I want to do is read this paragraph, okay? So pause the video here, take a second and read the paragraph, and then we'll come back. All right, so if you read the paragraph, you know that this is kind of background on whether you should take freedom away in order to improve people's health, that kind of basic stuff. And notice the examples they've given is on smoking is prohibited in places in order to improve the health of others, just like car emissions are regulated or controlled so that it doesn't give us so much pollution that it makes everybody sick. So they've given you two examples of where public health or we curtail or we control or limit the freedoms of others so that we make sure everybody can stay as healthy as possible, okay? Then we get down to read and carefully consider these perspectives. Each suggests a particular way of thinking about the conflict between public health and individual freedom. So these three perspectives, 1, 2, 3, are different ways that people would think about whether we should give up freedom in order to improve public health. Okay, so take a second, pause the video, and look at the three different perspectives. Okay, if you've had a chance to look, notice that perspective 1 is talking about our society should give the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which is essentially saying freedom is not as important as public health and safety. Okay. Perspective 2, nothing in society is more valuable than freedom. So essentially saying even if it helps some people, freedom is more important. So we shouldn't have to stop smoking. We shouldn't have to control our car emissions if it costs people freedom. The third perspective is kind of in the middle. The right to avoid health risks is a freedom too. When we allow individual behavior to endanger others, we've damaged both freedom and health. So the idea that that be the right to life as well as liberty is just as important as or is just as much of a freedom as being able to drive and smoke and do all these other things. Okay, so those are three different perspectives. That becomes important when you get down to the essay task. Okay, so pause the video and read through the essay task for a second. Okay, so if you've read through the essay task, you've essentially been given directions. Write a unified, coherent essay about the conflict between public health and individual freedom. In your essay, be sure to. So notice here, ACT is going to tell you, here are the things that you have to do on your essay. So if they're telling you to do it, you got to make sure you do it. So clearly state your own perspective on the issue, and the issue is public health versus freedom, and analyze the relationship between your perspective and at least one other perspective. Okay, so notice this is the most important bullet here. Okay, so you've got to have your perspective. So you can choose to believe in perspective 1, perspective 2, perspective 3, or kind of cobble together or put together your own perspective on the issue. So that's what they mean is analyze the relationship between your perspective and at least one other perspective. So if you decide that your perspective 1, you also have to show how you agree or disagree with perspective 2 or 3. Okay. So essentially what they're asking, if you've talked in your English classes about concession, what they're asking you to say is where do you agree or disagree with what one of these other groups believe? Okay, now here's the thing. with ACT, if you do not give that other perspective, they are not going to give you full credit. So you have to discuss the other side. All right, that's the big thing to remember. So your side is the most important, but you have to at least discuss the other side, okay, and where you fit in, where you agree or disagree, okay. The other bullets here are also important. Develop and support your idea with reasoning and examples. What that's telling you is that you've got to give specific examples. So notice up here they talked about smoking and they talked about car emissions, okay. That's the kind of thing they're looking for. But I would not go back and talk about smoking and car emissions. That's already been discussed, okay? You need to come up with some other freedoms that people either should give up for public health or should not give up, something really specific. So you could talk about, remember how everybody was really mad about the change in food that was in the vending machine across from the cafeteria? Well, that was a law that was passed in South Carolina that said the health of students is more important than the money we make off the vending machine. So we're going to change these and give you food you don't like as much, but but in order to make sure that nobody's overeating really bad food. Okay. So that would be something where you could agree that yes, teenagers' health is more important than the money the school makes off the vending machines. Or you could say no, because, as an individual, it's my right how I want to spend my $1.75. Okay. So that would be the kind of thing. So even though they've given you these examples, they've already talked about them. You got to think of something else. And I would suggest that you talk about at least two freedoms. Okay. Just like they did. They talked about two freedoms. You could talk about vending machines. You could talk about speed limits. You could talk about stoplights. You could talk about wearing helmets in when you play sports, the tackle rule, that kind of thing. So think about other freedoms that people would want that you might be willing to give up. Okay. Organize the essay clearly and logically. So you want to use your transition words, communicate your ideas effectively in standard written English. So you want to make sure that you are using that more formal English. Try to stay away from your slang terms. Want to make sure you get your spelling as good as possible. They're probably not going to kill you on spelling, so don't sweat that too much. Just make sure you're as careful as you can. Okay. Last little bit, your perspective may be in full agreement with any of those given, so meaning you can be 1, 2, or 3, or you can be somewhere in the middle. Okay. All right. So hopefully you have a little bit better idea of how to approach the prompt. Please send me any message if you have questions. All right, guys. Thanks.